Welcome to Between Product and Partnerships, a podcast focused on bringing together product, partnership, and engineering leaders to discuss how to build, support, and scale SaaS ecosystems. Presented by the SaaS Ecosystem Alliance and sponsored by Pandium, an integration platform and marketplace for ecosystems. I'm Liz Garcia, and I'm the community manager for the SaaS Ecosystem Alliance, and I'm also on the marketing team at Pandium. Today, we're talking all things technology partnerships with Chris Lavoie, a tech partnerships leader at Gorgias. Welcome, Chris. Can you tell us a bit about Gorgias and also your experience in tech partnerships?
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks, Liz. And thanks to the SaaS Ecosystem Alliance for having me as one of your inaugural podcast guests. So, yeah, I lead the technology partner program at Gorgias. Gorgias is a customer support help desk software used by direct to consumer brands to power the customer communications you'll have both pre and post purchase. So, think of, where is my order? I'd like to issue a return or an exchange. We'll power that for brands. My experience related to tech partnerships is short, but intense. So I've been at Gorgias for about almost 2 years now, and since that time, we've gone from a team of one to a team of six. We've become $1 million ARR channel, and we've launched an app marketplace that now has 75 plus apps and integrations in it, several of which are built and powered by Pandium as a plug for them. But yeah, it's been a fast and furious ride, but so far so good.
Yeah, and I think with that introduction, you're one of the perfect people to talk about building out a tech partner program. So I want to ask you, right? Like you just said, a year ago, your tech partner program was just you. So now that you run a team of 5, what advice would you give to someone who's just starting to grow out their team?
For sure. So I think when it comes to building out a team, you need to be able to justify that really to the leadership team, which always comes down to revenue opportunity and really measuring the impact. So with tech partnerships specifically, as opposed to say agency and channel partnerships, the ROI of tech partnerships is a little bit trickier to showcase. So obviously you can track revenue, but that can often be the tip of the iceberg. So one of my first points of advice is to early on make sure that you're accurately tracking and attributing all as much as you can of the impact that tech partnerships is having. So revenue, what is the impact of the integrations having on key metrics like churn, NPS, customer satisfaction, retention. How does it impact your billable mechanism? So for us, we're a ticketing based help desk. So certain integrations actually positively impact our billing mechanism. So we're actually generating more revenue per user through certain integrations. And then, yeah, really just deciding early on, keeping it simple. What are our few technology partners that there's enough revenue opportunity with, that there's enough of a product marketability opportunity with, meaning there's high usage of an integration and there's a great story to tell. And just really nailing the playbook with a few partners first, and then starting to expand, taking on more partners, and then that'll allow you to justify expanding your headcount.
That's a really great framework. And so once you've decided that the team is going to grow, what is some advice that you have for looking for a tech partner manager?
Yeah, so in terms of looking for a tech partner manager, they're a bit of a unique role. They need to be curious and excited about from the product perspective. They want to, you want them to be excited to get into the product, to be excited about integrations, the transformative effect that integrations can have on a company's growth. But they also need to, have some level of business savviness. They need to be comfortable in, client and partner facing environments. They have to be open to travel. So it's a difficult role to fill, as anyone who's hired tech partner managers can attest to. So really, the biggest thing I'm looking for is this eagerness to learn, and really being able to humble yourself and understand, okay, there's so much I don't know, but there's so much I do want to know, and I'm scrappy and I have the energy needed to learn what I need to know. So that's one thing. Typically looking for people who exhibit extreme ownership, right? So people who don't make excuses, people who become the CEO of their book of business, right? And really are as creative as possible to unlock growth, and people who are great teammates, right? So a lot of this isn't necessarily specific to the tech partner role itself, but are just general attributes. But one thing I will say that you definitely want someone with in a tech partner type role is is if they have a marketing type mindset, it can be a real advantage. Anyone in tech partnerships knows that it's basically a product marketing channel, right? It's like how well can you tell the story of an integration? And so we find that tech partner managers who have that marketing background or marketing curiosity tend to do really well, because they're able to articulate that story both through content but also through public speaking engagements.
I like how you focused a lot around the soft skills needed rather than like the more hard skills. But yeah, definitely, like you mentioned, like product focused and marketing focused. Um, would you say that you look for someone who embodies all these qualities in one person, or do you hire, like, would you hire specific people on the partnership team to kind of own the technical aspect, the more go-to-market marketing aspect?
Great question. So yeah, the question is do you try to hire one size fits all, everybody's kind of more or less the same, or do you try to diversify and basically leverage people's skill sets and unique talents? And it's definitely the latter in our case. So the 5 people on the team are all incredibly different and have different skill sets, different natural abilities, and different interests and passion, right? So one role on the team is it involves heavy amount of partner calls, meeting with partner sales and success reps, really evangelizing, being an advocate to get them excited to pitch and sell on our behalf. That's an incredibly exhausting role. It's very similar to an account executive, but she's just geared for this, right? She was literally built for this playbook, and she has just become a champion at it. And then I have other people on my team where that's not something that they necessarily want to do. They're more process, program building oriented. They want to, be in the lab, so to speak, mixing things up and see how they can work, not necessarily in a public environment type of role. And they thrive in that. Right. So we, definitely, I'm big on trying to not force people into a role, right. Really trying to adapt roles to both, yes, cater to our company's goals, but also more so align to what someone's naturally excited about and gifted at.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So now that we've talked about establishing a team, let's talk about how you measure success. So what KPIs do you think tech partner managers should have?
That's definitely
Yeah.
heated debate in the industry. I was just at Crossbeam's Supernode conference last week in Philadelphia. Christina Pandium, CEO, was there and gave a great talk. And so, yeah, there's a lot of conversations about KPIs. Typical KPIs, for those who may not be super familiar, would be sourced revenue, right? So basically like sales qualified opportunities, the amount of pipeline that you're generating in a given period. It could be a month, it could be a quarter. So that's one typical KPI. At Gorgias, at least, we are compensated and measured by closed revenue sourced from partners in a given period, right? So we're going the extra step. You're not just getting KPI on revenue opportunity generated, but it's actually closed. We like that model because it keeps you involved in the sales cycle longer, obviously all the way to the finish line. It really forces you to be strategic in how you source deals, right? And the quality of those deals. So, if you're just sourced on opportunity generated, maybe you don't care as much about getting qualified opportunities as long as they enter the pipeline. So this model, it's a little bit unorthodox and not used by all, but we like it, and it keeps partners involved as well longer, right? So imagine AE late stage in a big deal comes back to us and say, hey, this partner referred us this deal. It's gone cold. Can you re-engage with this partner to see if they can help us out? Partner managers are now incentivized to be cooperative in that scenario because they're not compensated until the deal is closed, right? So that's one example. Other KPIs you might see tech partner managers specifically measured on are things like the number of integrations added to their marketplace, maybe ones that hit a certain install threshold. So there's slightly unique KPIs for tech partner managers, but most of the ones that we see have some revenue attribute to it, whether it's created opportunity or closed opportunity.
And can you talk maybe a little bit to some of the metrics that you use to track, whether or not you're meeting some of the KPIs that you mentioned?
For sure. So, I mean, we use HubSpot as our CRM, for instance. We use this tool, SciSense, as our BI tool. It used to be Periscope, and now it's called SciSense. And so that's essentially, it gives us this like advanced look at all of our pipeline metrics. So, one thing I'm training partner managers on my team early on to do is to have that manager level understanding of your pipeline. It's not enough to say, oh, look, I'm on track to hit my goals this month, right? You need to be, have that foresight to be looking ahead. It's like, okay, like, did you exhaust all of your pipeline for this month, and now you're really vulnerable to a poor following month? So where's your pipeline at now? Where do you expect it to be heading into the next period or next month? So, metrics that we're looking at are, deals added, right, coming from partners, the average deal size, the average close rate, the average sales cycle length, things like that. And then obviously looking for trends month over month to see if anything drastic has changed. But those metrics typically will give us a good sense of what we can expect this month and obviously heading into future months.
Were there any other metrics that you wanted to bring up to show the value of like tech partnerships specifically to the business?
For sure. So one thing we're not doing a good enough job of just yet, but it's something that we're focusing on now, is how integrations specifically can add value beyond just closed revenue, but what's the impact it has on our marketing goals, right? There's a tremendous SEO boost when we're listed on some of the biggest app marketplaces in the space, right? Klaviyo is one of the biggest partners in our ecosystem. 100,000 plus customers were featured on their app marketplace. At one point, we were actually one of the 4 featured apps for an entire month, right? So there's this tremendous ancillary organic style marketing boost we're getting from something like that. So how do we measure that and give like an attribute to that? That's a little bit tricky, but more concisely, things like, how is integration adoption impacting our churn, right? So we know internally that once we get our customers to 5.5 integrations on average, churn just seems to drop precipitously. So it's like, how can we get more information like that to showcase churn mitigation, NPS or Net Promoter Score? How does the number of integrations used by our merchants track and correlate with our NPS? That's something that we need to have a better understanding of. But going a step further, not just integrations in general, but on a per integration basis, right? So which specific integrations are having the biggest impact on our churn rate, our NPS or our customer satisfaction, but also on our average deal size, right? So are we actually generating more revenue per customer when they're coming from a specific integration? And what's the sales cycle length look like, right? So it might be 30 days on average for our deals. Now all of a sudden they're 24 days, right? When they're coming from a technology partner referral. So those are some of the major metrics that other companies are tracking, but we're not quite there yet.
No, yeah. And I think that was great advice. And honestly, a lot of what you're saying has come up in a lot of the other panels that we've hosted, creating those trend lines between all those metrics that you mentioned. So transitioning a little bit here, we talked about partnerships being a really multifaceted role. So with that, cross-functional collaboration is a given. So what are some processes or frameworks that you can share for successfully working with product and engineering teams?
Yeah, cross-team functionality is a huge aspect for any successful technology partner program. We're incredibly reliant on them. And so one of the first things is establishing a great relationship as high up as you possibly can within those orgs. So whether that's the chief product or chief technical officer or the head of a department or even a director of a specific department, making sure that you have an open line of communication. You clearly understand their goals, how they're measured, what their 1 to 2 year vision is, and then articulating what your goals and your vision is, and then ultimately getting them excited to be a key contributor, right? So for instance, with our product and engineering team, if we want them to prioritize building a native integration that we're going to own, you need to obviously come with a business case to get buy-in in the first place, to get it inserted on a roadmap. But then you need to get them excited about, how is this going to extend our product? How is this going to transform the value that we're delivering to our customers? You need to make that crystal clear to them to get excited about. And then once the actual work is done and we're seeing the impact that we had hoped for, coming back to them and screaming from the rooftops about how amazing the impact actually was, getting them excited, right? Not just convincing them to do the work, but then once it actually is done, going back to share the successes and make them feel like a true stakeholder and a contributor to those the successes. So yeah, having regular communication, getting buy-in early on, understanding what motivates a team, how to get buy-in from them, how they like to communicate, and then ultimately celebrating the successes when they happen. Those are some of the key ingredients to a successful alignment with other teams.
It makes sense. So tech partner engagement requires supporting go-to-market and technical teams. So kind of going off of this, like how do you ensure both sides of the house have a good experience and are engaged? Anything that you would add to what you already said? I feel like you mentioned a lot of things that align with that.
Yeah, I think just regular, some form of cadence with these teams. So on the technical support side, we have a great integration QA team, two support specialists on our team, Maria and Tina, who are fantastic. And so they essentially, when someone wants to join our app marketplace, they can submit an application for an app that they've built. It'll get triaged to our integration QA team, and they'll essentially go through this process that we've built to essentially set up the integration on our test environment to make sure that it works. There's no edge cases, and then they'll ultimately approve it, and then that will allow the partner to get onto our marketplace. And so, we have a regular cadence with that team. So if there's any anomalies, any issues, any trends, we're getting inundated with incomplete applications, for instance, that's an alarm to me that we need to clarify or simplify how we're describing our application process. So we have an open line of communication there. With the product marketing team, for instance, on the go-to-market side, they're not necessarily, in the know of which specific apps or integrations we should focus on in terms of marketing and doing a go-to-market approach with. So that's where my team will come in and provide that important context, right? So really the best thing I can say is just having a regular cadence, whatever makes sense. It could be a monthly with a certain sub-team. It could be bi-weekly with another sub-team, but just establishing that and having a clear agenda for those meetings.
For sure. So transitioning again, we want to get some of your ideas on prioritizing partners. So how do you prioritize your tech partners and decide which partners to invest more resources in? And we could also talk about this maybe like in two pieces and then two buckets. Like how do you decide who to invest in, and then who to in the beginning, and then like who to invest in more after you've already established partnerships?
Yeah, good question. I'll start with how we make decisions and make bets at the beginning of a potential new partnership, and then I'll talk about how once, how do we audit and update who we're going to focus on the most. So at the beginning of a relationship, in deciding whether or not it's going to be a good fit for us, how big of an opportunity it's going to be, we'll use a tool like Crossbeam, for instance, which allows us to essentially engage in a very secure account mapping exchange. And so some of the key data points that I'm looking for when doing a Crossbeam exercise with a potential new partner are looking at what's our mutual customer base look like, which tells us that we're playing in the same sandbox, so to speak. So that number is very telling. How many of our customers match up with our partners' prospects? So that kind of paints the opportunity for them, the TAM from their perspective, and then vice versa. How many of their customers match up against our prospect population? And so that kind of shows us what the revenue opportunity might be there, right? So those three numbers alone can tell me quite a bit about how likely a specific partnership is to be successful. There are definitely other considerations, like is there an integration that exists already? That's always a strong indicator. What's the usage like? What's the feedback like? What's the value of that integration? If those are all strong, plus there's a strong revenue opportunity, plus the potential partner has a partner program in place, they have a dedicated partnership person to speak with. We're not dealing with like the head of marketing or a C-level executive. We're actually dealing with someone in a partnership role. All of that conspires to give us a very strong signal that this is a good partner to really make a strong bet on. And then, it can go down from there. So if they don't have a partnership function, the revenue opportunity is not as big, there's not an integration in place, then it's very difficult for them to break into our priority list, so to speak. So they would go into our like non-managed bucket, where you're basically there, you're a certified partner, but it's you basically get resources as available by invitation. So that's new partners, how we decide. And then in terms of existing partners, we're very data reliant at Gorgias. Our mantra is decide fast using data. So something I work with closely with my team is, auditing the performance of partners month over month, quarter over quarter, and really understanding, okay, which partners are overperforming? Why is that? How can we throw more gasoline on that to really accelerate that even further? Which partners are underperforming relative to expectation? Is this a longer term trend? Has something fundamentally changed with their company? Have they deprioritized partnerships? Have they moved into a different segment that's less and less overlapping with our ICP? Meaning we maybe need to deprioritize that relationship because we don't expect it to be resurrected, or maybe an underperforming partner isn't performing because we're not delivering enough value to them. We haven't been close enough with them. So maybe we should try for a quarter to really re-engage and see what we can do to get things back on track. So really just taking our partners and lumping into 3 buckets, like who's overperforming, how can we keep that going? Who's underperforming, how can we get things back on track? Or maybe we need to decide to like cool things off entirely. And then which partners are basically on track, we can't really expect much of a change either way. And then treating those 3 buckets entirely differently. So that's essentially what we'll do. And then we'll make decisions heading into new quarters. We'll typically do quarterly business reviews with our biggest partners. And then we learn a lot from those meetings in terms of, okay, what can we really expect? Are they actually going to be a good fit for us? And we'll make tough decisions to, deprioritize and reprioritize certain partners based on that information.
Just to circle back to when you're deciding to initially invest, I'm not sure if you mentioned, but do co-marketing or co-selling opportunities, is that also involved in your decision to initially invest in a company as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. Increasingly so, that is the case. So we transparently were very fixated on like the revenue opportunity that we could generate and expect from a potential partner. But as I mentioned earlier on, we're starting to appreciate and focus more on the other benefits that you can get from a partnership. What's the impact on our churn and user satisfaction, but also, what about the marketing boost that we can expect? So yeah, definitely now more than ever, when we're sizing up potential partners, we're asking questions like, what marketing resources do you have to offer? Is there co-marketing opportunities? Is there event sponsorships and joint events that we can host together? So that definitely is factoring in when we're deciding on new partners, but also when we're doing our audits quarter over quarter for our existing partners, how well have they done in the marketing front and the event side of things? And if they're, for instance, we're quite active in hosting in-person and virtual events. We have great data that shows which partners are top performers in terms of driving qualified opportunities and RSVPs to these events, and they step up to the plate. And there are some partners that continuously don't perform and don't live up to what they've promised. So they're essentially on a blacklist, right? Where it's like, okay, like, I know it sounds harsh, but I mean, it's the end of the day, it's the reality. So we know that we'll typically not invite those partners to co-host events with us because they say that they'll do one thing, but then they end up not marketing the event. So yeah, that's why, having this level of data for all things is really important.
Yeah, super helpful for making those decisions. So to kind of head off to the end of the conversation, we're going to talk about larger trends, your thoughts on larger trends when it comes to tech partnerships. So how should organizations be thinking about the decision to take a revenue share from their tech partners? What are your thoughts?
It's a great question. So in deciding whether or not to take a revenue share from a partner, you really need to ask yourself, is that the lever you need to get the results that you want? So for us, we don't really engage in much rev share agreements at all, as opposed to our like agency channel partnership program at Gorgias, which is tremendously productive. They essentially exclusively operate through revenue share agreements. That's the main lever they have to get these agencies and SIs to source this revenue, because we don't really have the opportunity to send them leads and send them direct revenue. So the way we can do that is through rev share. So that's how they're getting their kickback. With tech partners, it's challenging. And the bigger the partner is, the less likely they're probably going to be, the less interested they're probably going to be in getting rev share. So, a partner company of yours that's, worth over 100 million or over 1 billion, getting say 20% of a smaller deal amount rev share won't really be that palatable to them. So they're going to be demanding direct referral revenue, right? So the main thing I would say is, if it makes sense and it's like the main lever that's going to give you the leverage you need to get a successful partnership off the ground, then by all means enter into such an agreement. But I don't think it needs to be black or white where you either do it with all your partners or you don't do it with any of your partners. We basically, with our program, it's open for negotiation, right? As I said, most of the partnerships, we just try to figure out how can we add enough value to them where we can incentivize them to deliver enough value in return, specifically focused on co-selling, referral driving activities. But for certain partnerships where it's very one way, so there's 2 examples of that in our program where just based on where our product sits in a brand's life cycle, our partners aren't able to really send us leads because by the time they get a customer, they already have a help desk, so there's not an opportunity for them to send us leads. So it's very one way in terms of we're sending them a ton of leads, they don't really send us any in return. And so in that scenario, it's very one-sided, referral wise, then a rev share agreement makes sense, right? So we're actually getting some meaningful revenue share from them. And then we have the opposite where certain partners send us a ton of leads, but we're not able to send them any leads in return. So we'll enter into an agreement with them to pay them back essentially for their efforts. But in general, I'll try to avoid that and just establish a balanced relationship.
Yeah. So moving on to some more trends, what are some of the biggest challenges you're seeing with SaaS tech partnerships right now? And then where do you see SaaS tech partnerships going in the next 1 to 3 years?
For sure. So biggest challenge I would say is getting more bang for your buck from your app marketplace and your integrations, right? So I've spoken at length today about the commercial opportunity that you can get through these tech partnerships. But I think a big challenge that companies need to focus more on is that product marketing story. Don't get too blindsided and focus so much on classic biz dev commercialization tactics around driving revenue from your partners. You need to go back to the roots and focus on what's the story we can tell. How can we really understand at a deep level the impact that integrations are having on our shared merchants from like a really granular level, right? Not just saying, oh, this integration with these use cases gives you these benefits, like very fluffy surface level. Get down to the nitty gritty and be able to give specific data, right? So this integration will help you unlock 18.7% increase in conversion rates by doing X, Y, Z. Figuring out what that story is that you can tell, and then ultimately telling that to the masses, right? Both through public co-marketing efforts, but also importantly, evangelizing your customer-facing reps internally from both your side and your partner side, telling them that story as well and getting them excited to scream from the mountaintops about why customers and brands should be using both of our solutions together, right? So the main takeaway there is focus more and more on the product marketing and enablement side, which will then have this beautiful parlay into increased commercialization efforts. But if you're doing all of this classic top of the funnel activities that you might do, say on the channel agency partnership side, it's not, you will plateau and it's not going to allow you to grow. And then finally, where I see things heading into the future, it's a good question. I think a big shift you're going to see is increased co-selling, right? So a lot more partner influence, a lot more joint selling. So, an OEM white label type of approach where, we're literally becoming an embedded solution in our partner's product and platform. And instead of us having to necessarily be as involved to generate revenue from a partner, they're essentially able to like sell us on their behalf, almost like as an add-on, right? So an AE at a partner organization closes a deal, great. They get into upsell mode and they say, oh, by the way, I think you'd really benefit from our Gorgias add-on. You can just tack this onto your bill. We can connect our Stripe accounts, for instance, on our partner side. They collect the payment and then they can back channel that back to us. So I see that as a trend. Other more mature industries in SaaS do this already. The larger companies in e-com, SaaS, that's not really quite the case yet. And so that's something that we're looking towards ourselves.
Yeah, it definitely seems like that with the co-selling also, especially with Crossbeam's acquisition of Partnered. So that should be pretty interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, that was my last question. Thanks, Chris, for joining us and sharing your expertise. Is there anywhere where people who are listening in can connect with you, LinkedIn, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. You can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me at chris@gorgias.com, Chris with a C. Happy to chat anytime, all things tech partnerships related.
Yeah, I personally follow you on LinkedIn and I've just come into the SaaS ecosystem partnerships world, and I feel like I've definitely learned a lot from following you. So definite recommend. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the content, subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. If you're someone who is working on building and scaling SaaS product partnerships, we invite you to apply to be a member of our community at saasecosystemalliance.com.